I tell you what, Dustin, I don't know if you have dogs. I don't know if you have kids, but Bentley is the most spoiled of all the spoiled, man. Like it happens every time. It's like clockwork. I decided to close the window because I have a show to start, and he wants to go sit by the window so that he can, try to get me to open it again. And he's going to scratch at it. He's going to be a pest. Do you have to deal with any of that?
I have a German Shepherd who is a big baby. I have a 10-year-old, and then we have a cat who pretty much she'll run onto the porch, and then we'll shut the door, and then she instantly comes over and meows at the door, like, you locked me on the porch. And we're like, you just went out there. Like, stop it.
Yeah, come on. Like we gotta teach these fur babies a lesson. Hey, it's not on your time, it's on our time. I just don't know how to do it yet because he's spoiled rotten.
That's why my studio's in the basement, so they don't come down and bother me. So
you lucky dog. I mean, pun not intended, but
I can shut the door and the dog doesn't come down. And even if he does, he's a tall German Shepherd, but you can't really see him on camera. He can't really like jump up on anything. So
yeah, no, he will literally get in the main area of the shots. He will try to get on my lap. He will bark on shows. He will make sure that he is known that he is live, just as live as we are right now. Yeah. So I love it, man. Did you go to the expo?
I did. I had a great time at the expo. It was a lot of fun. It was my first year going.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Got to meet a ton of people, which is obviously the reason I wanted to go. Try to connect with people. I mean, I've done probably 70 different podcasts since October. So it's like I know a ton of people that I've done videos with, and then people I've interacted with online and people I work with on different websites. So it was great just to go and meet everyone. I won't say overwhelmed. I felt like I didn't get as much one-on-one time with people as I wanted because it was like, oh, let me meet this person. And you spend 5-10 minutes with everyone. So I definitely think next year I'm going to be a little more strategic with my time and try to set some more meetings with people like, hey, let's go grab breakfast on this day and let's go grab lunch and do some more of that kind of stuff. Because I did have a really nice, I walked back from the bar with Joey Wright from Front Yard Fantasy and Football Guys, and I've known Joey, online for about a year and a half. So it was just nice to kind of have that little one-on-one time, just that 5-10 minute walk and talk. So that was nice. So I realized oh man, I really want more of that. So, but yeah, it was my first year and I loved it. So
it was a giant blur for me, and I don't know whether that was just like the speed of everything going or the alcohol, but it was a giant blur regardless.
Yeah, and I had some, I don't want to say reservations going, but I felt very I don't know what's happening when, and it was very last minute, here's the schedule. It's like, okay. And there's just certain things you don't know. Like if you don't know everyone goes to what's that, Georgie's, the bar. Yeah. You don't know. And if you don't know everyone goes to that one breakfast restaurant, you miss out, right? So we went to Waffle House one day because the two guys I was with had never been to Waffle House. So I was like, let's just go to Waffle House because you've never been. But had I known everyone went to this one specific, Stella's or whatever it is down the street, I would have went there for breakfast, right? And been part of those sort of groups. So, things to learn from next year, just to kind of I think going into next year, I'm going to go, hey, can me and you grab breakfast on Saturday? Hey, can me, you, and this, these three people, can we grab lunch on Saturday? Send dinner Sunday, dinner Friday night, kind of schedule my time a little more, have a little more one-on-one time. Because Friday night, me, Joe and Steve from Front Office Pros, who I'm their growth and planning strategist, we all went to the board game bar with Joey Wright, Tim Wright, Simon, Ricky Butts.
Yeah, I think I saw y'all there.
Yeah, went to the board game bar, and it was nice, just the six of us just playing board games, just hanging out, talking. A little more of an intimate setting. You're like, okay, this is fun. We just get to play board games and kind of laugh and have that little more intimate time of just kind of conversations, which I kind of really liked. So I'm a huge extrovert, so I love people. Let me meet everyone, but I think deep down I really wanted to have some little more one-on-one time. But end of the day, great connections, great meeting people, meeting people in the flesh, got to do some really cool things, just kind of build those things. So, Wendy, who Wendy was on the chat, oh, Dustin should come on your show. I met Wendy at the Chicago live draft for Scott Fishbowl. And it was just hey, it's nice to meet you. And then she was she saw me at the extra. She's like, it's so nice to see you again. I was like, yo, you too, Wendy. She's super sweet. And, so just seeing people again, some people I met at the Scott Fishbowl draft, but then meeting all these people in person was awesome. So it was a blur, though. It definitely became a blur after a while.
You ready to kick this episode off, man? You ready to get going?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go.
This is Fantasy Intervention. here to intervene with your fantasy life, Shane Manila, Jacob Sanderson, and Chase Vernon.
Oh my God. And as we get onto the show, there's some breaking news. But before we get into the breaking news, welcome into Fantasy Intervention. We are here to intervene with your fantasy football life. I am joined tonight by Dustin. You guys can find him at the Dunit, D-U-N-I-T.
It's actually D-Unit, but that's all right.
Oh, I'm sorry, D-Unit. I apologize.
You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Yes, it's
All
actually
right.
the D-Unit. Twitter doesn't
D-Unit
allow for the
13.
hyphen. Yes.
Yes. At the D-Unit 13 over there on Twitter. Make sure you guys go check him out. Dustin, what's going on, man? Talk to me. Why are you here talking on the Rookie Wide Receiver Show tonight?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm deep in these rookies this year. I went to the combine with press credentials. I was at the draft with press credentials. So I've got to talk to a lot of these rookies, including the receivers, some multiple times. So some of the guys at the draft, like JSN, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, I've interviewed 3 different times, twice before the draft and once post-draft. So kind of a little more, I don't want to say insider knowledge, but I definitely have a stronger opinions on them than I think most.
I love that, man. Love that. And I heard you have a hot take coming, so we'll save that in a little bit. Or maybe not hot take, but at least a spicy take on one of these rookies.
Yes.
I'm excited to dive into that in a little bit. But before we do, let's go ahead and discuss some of this news. I have to bring this up. I have to hit it right off the bat. You know, I was going to start out with some Trey Lance, but no, we're going to go Jonathan Taylor. The Eagles have reportedly discussed a possible trade for running back Jonathan Taylor. Why, bro? Why is this happening? Why do they hate? Why does the league hate DeAndre Swift? Why do they hate Kenny Gainwell? Why do they hate Rashad Penny? I mean, I get that they are not the most durable running backs, but Kenny Gainwell could be the best running back in the league. I mean, come on, right? No, I'm halfway kidding with that. Jonathan Taylor joining this crowded running back room is somewhat bizarre, especially after going out and trading Swift. What's your take on that?
I mean, I would question that take. I'm looking at the Twitter machine, and we'll see. If you're a team, you have to inquire about Jonathan Taylor, right? No matter who you are. Unless you're the Giants who have Saquon Barkley, unless you're the 49ers who have Christian McCaffrey, unless you're, I think that's probably it. Like, I don't know who among the teams would not at least ask about what it would take to get Jonathan Taylor, right? Even if you're the Chargers with Austin Eckler, I said for a while ago, like, just swap those two. Like, let them pay that guy. Like, they'd have to pay someone. Even if you're Cincinnati with Joe Mixon, like, they could move on from Joe Mixon and take Jonathan Taylor. Like, every team gets better with Jonathan Taylor in the mix. Maybe not the Jets because they've got Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook, but I think you have to pose those questions, especially if you're a Super Bowl contender like the Eagles. They have to at least discuss it. I don't think it'll amount to anything. I said all along, Jonathan Taylor will be a Colt. He's not going anywhere. So it is interesting. If the Eagles were to get Jonathan Taylor, I think they're a Super Bowl favorite. I think they're almost a lock to make the Super Bowl if they stay healthy.
Yeah, that's so bizarre because the running back does play a major role for the outdoor teams, you know, as we get closer to the winter season. But like for them to go out, first off, when you trade for Jonathan Taylor, you first have to satisfy the needs of the Colts, right? Then you have to satisfy the needs of Jonathan Taylor. You have to pay him big money because that's what he's asking. And, you know, deservedly so. I know that he's coming off an ankle injury, which is part of the play as well. But, like, there are so many different boxes you have to check when you go and trade for Jonathan Taylor. And the fact that half these teams aren't willing to pay running backs, it just seems somewhat absurd, especially a team like the Eagles who have already paid to acquire a free agent in Rashad Penny. They paid to acquire DeAndre Swift. They spent draft capital, I think it's a 4th round or 5th round pick on Kenny Gainwell. You know, it's kind of bizarre that they would go out and they would spend even more draft capital on a position that is so insignificantly valued, you know, while also having an offensive line that's aging. Still one of the best offensive lines in the league, don't get me wrong. They got a quarterback that, you know, essentially is commanding top end money. A.J. Brown, who they ended up just paying. Devonta Smith, who's going to end up being on the payroll, maybe not at the same time Jonathan Taylor will be. But it just seems a little bit absurd. I don't see the Eagles being a landing spot. A team that I would love to see a landing spot for not only Jonathan Taylor, but another guy that we're about to talk about is the Minnesota Vikings, right?
Yeah.
The Minnesota Vikings are in a great spot to put Jonathan Taylor in a position to succeed. They've got an explosive offense. You're still having to worry about rookie Jordan Addison. You're having to worry about KJ Osborne to an extent. TJ Hawkinson, who's also a great blocker as well. Then you have Justin Jefferson, Kirk Cousins. I mean, and Jonathan Taylor, that mix just seems like a sexy ad, especially with a defense that kind of plays balls to the walls in terms of turnovers, right? This is a team that goes for the turnovers. They don't always get them, when they don't end up getting burned. So they end up with a bad defense in terms of fantasy rankings. But getting a running back who can take seconds off the clock, and acquire more time essentially against the defense, it seems like a match made in heaven.
It does. I do worry about their cap situation. So Hawkinson's going to be due for a deal soon, I believe after this year. So he has all the leverage. I mean, it even came out today that his team and his agent believe that they have all the leverage because Minnesota traded all those picks to get him, and they need him in that offense. And I think they do need him. It all depends on what they think Alexander Mattison is. Obviously, they didn't want to pay Dalvin Cook, so it seems odd that they would trade for Jonathan Taylor and then pay Jonathan Taylor when you could have just paid Dalvin Cook for one more year.
But Dalvin Cook's 28,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the age difference is huge. Yeah, Jonathan Taylor would be great on Minnesota. It's probably the best landing spot. I mean, of course, everyone's going to say, go to Miami, go to Tampa Bay, go to Kansas City. Everybody's going to throw out those landing spots. They're just not realistic. If Miami wanted a running back, they'd have a running back. They would have got Dalvin Cook. They would have gotten Zeke. They would have brought in Fournette. I think Miami is fine with who they have. I just don't see a world where all of a sudden Jonathan Taylor is going to get the money, where Barkley and Fournette and Zeke and Dalvin Cook and Josh Jacobs couldn't get the money coming off that ankle injury. Like, yes, he's good, but he does have that ankle injury. So I'm not sure Jonathan Taylor is going to get the bag when no one else could. Yes, he's younger, but he does have those injury concerns.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have to get the bag in order to switch teams, of course. Now, let's talk about another player that could end up in Minnesota, and this is a guy who was involved in trade talks prior to the draft. Now the draft is over. This makes things a lot more difficult in order to acquire him because you have, positions that are solved, right? You end up having guys who are starting to fit into your scheme. But Trey Lance, who is now out of the scheme in San Francisco, it seems. Looks like Sam Darnold took over the number 2 spot. Meanwhile, Brandon Allen looks to be taking over the number 3 spot, which means that Trey Lance is the odd guy out. They claim there's still a competition up until tonight, but Minnesota seems like a sexy spot for him. I know this is not the type of offense that Kevin O'Connell runs. However, he is capable of doing so. And having a guy with downfield ability, ability to create plays. You add Jonathan Taylor in there, hypothetically, just saying, like adding Jonathan Taylor is not a bad thing. But then you have a guy who can get open after the play breaks down in Justin Jefferson, right? You have a guy who can create space in Jordan Addison. You have a guy in TJ Hawkinson who can move after the block. I mean, it just seems like a good spot for Trey Lance to go to and learn under what seems to be like a saint of a quarterback after that whole thing on Netflix and Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, when this news came out that Trey Lance was the 3rd stringer and they were exploring options, I said if I'm Minnesota or Seattle, I'm calling to see what it costs, because Kirk Cousins is good, not great. Geno Smith is good, not great. They're both going to be looking at guys next year. Everybody was talking they might get a guy this year in the draft, and they didn't. I don't think Trey Lance starts this year without an injury. Like, no matter where he's going, he's not going to be a starter. This late in camp, this close to the season, he's not going to get traded to Atlanta, which is ridiculous to even think so. But let's say Atlanta or Tampa Bay, they're not going to trade for a guy this late and start him week 1. So I think if you're Minnesota, you go, and I tweeted this and people are giving me crap about it. Like, outside of Caleb Williams, is Trey Lance better than the next guy, Drake May or whoever else it is in college? Now, yes, you might get some more contract, but you can probably get Trey Lance cheap for like a 3rd rounder, maybe 4th rounder. I don't know what San Fran wants. You can probably sign him to a deal, because what else is he going to do? He's going to sit this year, hopefully start in 23 and then be a free agent after 1 year. Like, people aren't going to pay him a ton of money in the open market. So you might be able to extend him to a long-term contract if you believe he's your guy. So I think Minnesota would be a great landing spot for him. Sit behind Kirk Cousins, learn from Kirk Cousins, learn from Kevin O'Connell, who has that experience with quarterbacks, or go to Seattle and learn from Pete Carroll. I just don't see a way that Trey Lance starts this year without an injury, and that's a shame because I think he can be good. I think it was just bobbled from the get-go with San Fran. They clearly, half the team wanted him, half of the team did it, and they never figured that out until now.
Well, a big part is injuries, right? And you don't want to trade, top end picks for a guy that's, injured all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if he commands a 3rd-round pick, to be honest with you. I mean, you could say like, oh, well, the draft capital where he was drafted before could command that, but he's been injured the whole time. And now he's 3rd on his depth chart. Like, oh, go ahead and keep him, San Fran. It's just a wasted, space essentially.
And San Fran gave up a ton for him. And I'll say this: people are out there going, "Oh, trade him to Atlanta." I'm waiting for someone to tell me why he's better than Desmond Ridder, other than draft capital, which we clearly know doesn't matter. Tell me why Trey Lance is better than Desmond Ridder. Because is it college production? Nope, that's Desmond Ridder. Is it games played? Nope, that's Desmond Ridder. What is it? Is it health? Nope, that's Desmond Ridder. Like, what is people thinking that Trey Lance is also better than Desmond Ridder and he should go to Atlanta and start there? I don't get it.
I think it's the athletic upside that he offers, but once again, like you brought it up, I mean, how many times can a guy get injured? We're talking about me wishing I was built out of vibranium before the show started, right? Because like I'm just breaking out at this point in my life. Like how many, games or how many times can you get injured before it regresses your physical attributes? So I'm not sold that he is better than Desmond Ridder. He might still have the upside in terms of his arm talent, maybe, but I don't disagree with you there. Yeah. I think that there's a couple interesting spots for him in terms of backup space. I don't hate what you said with Seattle, although I think that they might already feel like they have a version of Trey Lance and Drew Lock as the backup. And Drew Lock's been fine for them. So I don't really see him going there. He'd be a 3rd stringer there regardless, just because Drew Lock knows the system.
Yeah, Drew Lock does have that knee injury, which doesn't seem serious, but if that's a lingering issue and they don't feel they have Drew Lock to start the season, they might go out and find someone.
Yeah, very true. I just can't think of that many other spots where I would like to, acquire him. Like if it wasn't for Will Levis, I would love him with Tennessee. That would be phenomenal because you just hand it off to Derrick Henry. If something happens, you don't have like the upside. Meanwhile, you haven't. But it's tough. I was never a Trey Lance guy. I really didn't understand the move up for that outside of pure upside, and it'll be interesting to see going forward. Now, let's hop over to Corey Davis, who just announced his retirement today. Not too many fantasy implications here, so I don't want to stick on it too much. But in terms of the offense for the New York Jets, does this open up any more targets for potentially like Mecole Hardman or somebody that's a little bit deeper over there on the depth chart? Because I don't think it really affects Allen Lazard. I don't think that it affects Garrett Wilson. I feel like if anybody could affect maybe a Mecole Hardman.
No, I don't think it affects him. I mean, it seems like Randall Cobb has replaced Corey Davis. I think, we're going to see a lot more Randall Cobb than Mecole Hardman. I've traditionally just been out on Mecole Hardman. Like, people seem to want him to be the next guy, and I'm like, he's never been the guy. So
you think that Randall Cobb is number 3 on the depth chart?
I do.
Okay. Interesting.
I just think that chemistry with Rodgers, it pays the dividends. He can play the slot better than I think Mecole Hardman can be. He can be that, underneath slot guy, 3rd down possession receiver. So I think Randall Cobb is probably 3. He might end up being 4th on the depth chart, but I think he'll play the 3rd amount of snaps when all said and done come week 1.
All right. So let's hop on to the main part of the show. Let's talk some rookie wide receivers, baby. Let's go ahead and talk some rookie wide receivers. I do have this up real quick, so I'm going to do a quick little monologue. To draft or not to draft rookie wide receivers. Since 2019, with A.J. Brown, we've seen a higher hit rate of exciting rookie seasons for fantasy football. Of course, not all of them have been relevant season long. We've seen certain players stand out. 6 of the top 7 rookie wide receivers that were drafted in 2022 performed well enough to watch their stock go up, and the only one who didn't was Jameson Williams, who didn't see a stock drop, really. He was injured the entire year, and people are still split on him, so he still has his fantasy relevance. Meanwhile, guys like Sky Moore, Pickens, Pierce, Wan'Dale Robinson stand out and contribute in certain games. And in 2021, we still had some studs, including the greatest and the 5th greatest rookie season of all time. Before that, we had Justin Jefferson, we had Higgins, we had Lamb, we had Ayuk, and then Drake London by the way, this past year had an abysmal quarterback play, as we talked about with Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota, but he still finished out as wide receiver 31. So all these players that I'm naming, right, they end up having better finishes overall than what they're drafted at. And this year is no different. Keep in mind, there's only 5 rookie wide receivers that were named starters at the beginning of the season last year. None of them got drafted in the top 36 of wide receivers last year, but yet we had 3 or 4 finish inside the top 36. So this year we're looking at 10 to 11, I should say, rookie wide receivers with potential starting roles out of the gates in 2023, which is probably the most we've seen in quite a long time, maybe in NFL history. And the earliest wide receiver for a rookie that's off the board is JSN, who, like we talked about before the show started, has a wrist injury. He's likely to slip a round or 2 for redraft leagues. He is getting drafted at wide receiver 35 or 36, I believe. So he's right there on the borderline of that gap of the wide receiver 3s. In your opinion, is that justified? Should we be waiting to draft rookie wide receivers in redraft leagues?
I say yes. I think you should be waiting. I think everyone wants the shiny new toy. We want Justin Jefferson, but the reality is you could get Jalen Reagor, right? Like that's where we're at with these rookie wide receivers.
Even with your advice.
Yeah. Yes. I think there's a point where we have to say, hey, what's their volume going to look like? If you look at the wide receivers drafted in the first round since 2019, only 2 have finished above 36 with less than 100 targets. So are these guys going to get 100 targets in the system, right? So, I mean, Brandon Ayuk finished 35 with 96 targets. So he was right on the cusp. But look at it last year. Drake London, 117 targets, wide receiver 31. Garrett Wilson, 147, wide receiver 21. Chris Olave, 119, wide receiver 25. Jahan Dotson, 61, wide receiver 51, right? So we're just not there. Year before that, Jamar Chase, 128 targets, wide receiver 5. Jalen Waddle, 114, wide receiver 13. Devontae Smith, 104, wide receiver 29. You have Rashad Bateman, who had 67 targets, figured as wide receiver 69. You have guys like Kadarius Toney, 59 targets, wide receiver 89. So for me, it's that volume aspect. I don't see a guy this year that steps in and can get close to 100 targets.
Really?
Yeah, I just don't. Who's it going to be? I think Zay Flowers has the most potential to get there out of all of them. This is my spicy take. I've been out on Jordan Addison since the draft. Out of them. I have a lot of questions. I've interviewed Jordan Addison 3 times. I have questions about his size. He's not overly tall. None of them are. But he is skinny and frail. He makes Bryce Young look big. Like, Jordan Addison is a small, frail dude. I wonder about his durability. I also have questions about his ability to pick up the playbook and pick up audibles on the line. If you look at his stats when he transferred to UFC, it was a down year. That could be because his ability to process the playbook and process audibles takes longer. In interviews, I wasn't overly impressed with his ability to react on the fly and be quick. I just didn't see it. I also see Jordan Addison as someone who sees football, who doesn't really love football. When you talk to Zay Flowers, you love Zay Flowers. There's no way you can interview Zay Flowers and not instantly fall in love with the dude. He's funny. He's got a huge smile. He loves football. Jordan Addison comes off as a guy who knows he's good at football and can make money at football, but doesn't really love the game of football, right? Obviously, you're not doing everything you can to succeed in the league when you're driving 100 and whatever miles an hour, at 3 a.m. Like, obviously, you're not doing everything you can to progress in the league. Even when he got drafted and he's on the draft stage getting interviewed by, I believe, Susie Colbert, and she says, how's it feel to go play with Justin Jefferson? He said, let's go get paid. It wasn't let's go win championships. It wasn't let's go win the division. It was let's go get paid. That's who I see Jordan Addison as, someone who just loves football, doesn't love football, loves getting paid, and knows that he's good enough at football to do it. Can he get 100 targets? Maybe. Adam Thielen had 100 some targets last year. Is he better than Adam Thielen last year? I don't think he is. He's not as tall. He doesn't run as good as routes. He doesn't have the chemistry with Kirk Cousins. He's not a red zone threat. I don't see it for Jordan Addison. That's my spicy take. I think Jordan Addison, I've been out. I don't think he's anywhere close to the top 36. I think he finishes in the top 50 maybe. I just don't see him being a superstar on the football field.
All right, so let's actually dive into these players since you're cheating the show sheet, my friend. And let's talk a little bit about some of these individual guys, such as JSN. All right, JSN is predicted to be the top wide receiver in this class, and when you talk about the ability to do so, he's got a lot of not only target competition but just competition across the whole offense. Tyler Lockett isn't going to cede that many targets, right? DK Metcalf isn't going to cede a ton of targets. Meanwhile, they're still going to run the ball, which they said they were going to do when they drafted Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. So, I mean, does JSN, is he a little bit overhyped now? Is he the wrong guy to be drafting as the first rookie wide receiver off the board?
I think so now, right? 2 weeks ago, no. But now with this wrist injury, he could miss the first 4 weeks of the season, 3 weeks of the season. I think we'll see his ADP start to drop a ton.
Do you think that he falls below Quentin Johnston, who is the second wide receiver off the board currently? Second rookie wide receiver.
Yeah, I think he drops below Quentin Johnston. I just think people are scared because it was reported he had surgery, but then it came out that he hasn't had it. He's getting it looked at, and he might have surgery. So if he hasn't had surgery yet, that's still... If he had surgery on Monday, that's different than next Monday. That's a whole week of timeline. We're only 2 weeks from the season. If you're talking 4 to 5 weeks of recovery and you push that out another week, then you're talking week 4, week 5 that he's coming back. Also probably takes some time to ramp back up, right? Like we've seen receivers not start off great. Like they take a couple games. So I don't see him reaching his full potential in that offense until week 7, week 8. I just don't know if there's going to be enough time for him to reach those numbers. Like you said, Lockett and Metcalf aren't giving up targets. So I don't know where those go around. Geno Smith doesn't share the ball much. Like after Lockett and Metcalf, who was the third receiver on that team last year?
Marquise Goodwin.
Yeah, Marquise Goodwin, Noah Fant. Like Marquise Goodwin, I think, had 50 targets.
Yeah, it wasn't good. It wasn't pretty.
It wasn't good. And I don't see them all of a sudden going, yeah, we're just going to throw the ball a ton. When you did draft Zach Charbonnet, you have Ken Walker. Like, I agree with you. There's just too much competition, too many mouths to feed, and I think he's odd man out. And I think they're going to be slow bringing him back with that wrist injury. Wrists are funky. Like, if it's just a small fracture, they're going to want to make sure he's 100% before they bring him back. It was a pick they made, I think, for the future. I don't think it was for this year. I think they know they got one more year of Lockett, and then Jordan Addison can slide in that role next year. So, dynasty-wise, I'm going to buy the dip in week 2, 3 when he's not playing. Right now, I think he's being drafted a little too high.
All right, Quentin Johnston then. I mean, we talked about not giving up targets to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I mean, arguably, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are the better wide receiver duo. So, I mean, they also have, some weapons, I guess, in the receiving game. When you talk about Austin Eckler, right? He could be a weapon, right? I mean, like, how many targets can go around in that offense? And which guy are we actually considering to be the better rookie draft pick for redraft leagues?
Well, I think that's why their ADPs are lower this year, right? Quentin Johnston was one of the only tall, big receivers in this draft class. Most of them are smaller guys. Yes, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are probably the better duo when healthy, and that's the big question is when healthy. They miss a ton of games, especially Mike Williams. We saw Josh Palmer last year have good weeks when those guys were missing and even have decent weeks when they're there. Everybody expects Quentin Johnston to slide in when one of those guys misses. I wouldn't be surprised if between Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, they miss 5 games this year. Now, is that enough to get Quentin Johnston in the top 36? Probably not. Skill-wise, he's there. Like, I think he's up there, but he is fighting Josh Palmer for that wide receiver 3 role. You still have Gerald Everett. You have Austin Eckler. I don't see him getting to the top 36, but I think he has the best. I think he has the biggest shot to get there outside of Zay Flowers. I think he's got a good shot because I question Mike Williams' durability and even Keenan Allen's durability. And then can he beat out Josh Palmer? I think he can, although I like Josh Palmer. Can he be the second? If it's him and let's say it's Quentin Johnston and Keenan Allen on the field and Mike Williams is missing 3 games, Quentin Johnston is the second read, right? Like that's a good spot to be in that Justin Herbert offense. Like you want that. So I think he has a shot in redraft leagues. I'm drafting him probably where he's at in ADP. Hope to get him cheaper, obviously, and hope that I can throw him in for those couple weeks when he's injured. Dynasty, I like him because I do think Keenan Allen is a lot like Tyler Lockett, and I think he's done probably after this year.
I do want to answer a question real quick. I do see Jamie's questions. We will get to Jamie's questions first, but I do want to answer this question. 42 is a lock. He says he's in a win now situation. He drafted a chain and Zay Flowers. Should he give up a 2024 first, third, and 2025 fourth for Eckler in a Dynasty Superflex league? I'm going to go ahead and say yes right off the bat, just because I think that's going to be a late first if your team is stacked, as you say in the comments. This upcoming class is going to be very top heavy, in my opinion. And so if you don't have a top 6 pick, those 2024s are kind of just like trash for me, the 2024 first.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would make this trade. I agree. It's a late first if you're in a win now, which means you're going to be the end of the first round pick regardless. Like, this could put you over the top. The third next year is meh at this point, looking at the class. And then 2025, I mean, that's a fourth in 2025. That's not a big deal. If they wanted a first and a second, I probably don't do that. But I think a first, a third, and a fourth and 25 is well worth Eckler, and I would make that trade. I do think that receiving prowess, that gives you some extra flexibility. I think you're good there.
Pull that trigger, baby.
Yep.
Pull that trigger. It's a great move. Make sure you guys hit subscribe and like on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasy intervention. Once again, that's youtube.com/fantasy intervention. Let's go ahead and hop over to Zay Flowers, who I absolutely love. This dude is a speed demon that can create space. He's a monster. We've seen it time and time again. And, you know, one of my biggest things that I've been hitting on lately is, hey, everybody peaks at a certain point, right? And some of these receivers, they peak, they have their breakout at an earlier age. That's the greatest indicator to see success in the NFL. However, some players end up breaking out just a little bit later. We look at the Terry McLaurins, right? We look at even like Chris Olave to an extent. Zay Flowers is one of those guys that's just peaking a little bit later than we've seen some of these other players peak. He's getting the work in. He's getting the necessary training to hit that next elite level. I think that Zay Flowers is the most elite wide receiver in this class. He has the potential to be that number one guy, and I think that he breaks the top 36 pretty easily. How do you feel?
I agree. I think he's the guy. If I was going to bet on one of these guys to break the top 36, it's Zay Flowers. That offense should be very high power, where everybody's expecting Todd Monken to come in with this air raid, and throw the ball around. I think Bateman's just okay. I think OBJ can be good. I have a couple friendly wagers with some of my friends about OBJ versus DJ Chark, who's going to have a better season, and I'm on the Odell Beckham bandwagon.
Oh, you're on the Odell side.
I'm on the Odell side. DJ Chark is trash, in my opinion. He's hot trash. I just, no, I'm out. I love Zay Flowers. Like I said, when you meet him, his personality is infectious. He is the same height as Jordan Addison, maybe an inch difference. But Zay Flowers is all muscles. So I interviewed them Wednesday before the draft at a middle school. They were doing an event for a Play 60. A bunch of middle school kids running around. I thought Jordan Addison was a middle schooler. Couldn't tell it was Jordan Addison if for his shirt that said, Jordan Addison. Zay Flowers, you go, that dude is just yoked. Like, he is just, he's broad, he's thick, he's all muscles. It's like muscles and smile. That's all there is to Zay Flowers. It's just muscle and smile.
You sound like Jimmy Garoppolo talking about Dante Pettis. So I don't know how confident I feel right now.
But Zay Flowers loves football. When you interview him and you talk to him, he loves football and he gets it. He's like, I'll go out there and block. He's like, I'll go out there and return punts. I'll do whatever it takes. When I interviewed him at the combine, it was, I'm going to be the first in, first out. But you actually believed him when he said it. All those guys say those things, but I believed him when he said it. I think he's got the unique ability with the ball in his hands to create space, to break tackles, to be shifty enough that I think he'll get by guys. So if you're trying to arm tackle Zay Flowers, it's just not going to happen. I think he can get easily into the top 36 for wide receivers. Again, we're looking at close to 100 targets is kind of my benchmark to get there based on these other rookie receivers. I think he can get there, right? It's Mark Andrews.
Targets.
Yeah, it's Mark Andrews in that offense, and then somebody else. It could be Bateman, who has injury history. Now, I love Beckham, but Beckham's not exactly the most durable guy in the world.
70 target stops.
Yeah, so if I think Zay Flowers can get there based on touchdowns with 80 targets, I think it's easy for him to get to the top 36. So I love Zay Flowers. I think he's going to be great in Baltimore. If Zay Flowers would have went to, let's say he goes to the Chargers instead of Quentin Johnston, I may be less bullish on him just because of the fit and the scheme there, because I don't think he can slide in when Mike Williams is hurt. So I definitely like the landing spot there. If Zay Flowers goes to Minnesota, I probably like him a little more because he's going to get more targets. So I think it was a great fit for them there, and it was just such a value pick in the draft. And so, yeah, Zay Flowers is my guy to reach the top 36 for sure.
So let's hop over to Mingo. We already know how we both feel about Addison. Not biggest fans. Yep. I still think that Addison could fit that top 36, but it's going to be at the back end. I think that he could finish 34, 35, 36, squeak in with some injury help. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Mingo, can Mingo take over the number one role over Chark and over Thielen? It looks like he's going to be playing flanker as Chark plays the X and Thielen plays the slot. Thielen and Mingo might interchange in that. I've seen Mingo projected to be in the slot as well. But this is a dude who's going to see all of the snaps in 3 wide receiver sets, if not possibly 2 wide receiver sets, especially if something happens to Thielen, who hasn't been healthy, from year to year. Like, he's dealt with nagging injuries, whether that's kept him on the field or pushed him off.
Yeah, and Chark has a hamstring injury today. He suffered some sort of hamstring injury. They say
Chark can't stay healthy either.
No, I mean, I think in 2 wide receiver sets, it's Thielen and Mingo. My question is Bryce Young capable of supporting a high-end wide receiver? I think Bryce Young's good, not great. I think Miles Sanders sees a ton of targets, but Mingo's probably the guy I want in that offense just because you don't know, especially in a best ball or PPR format. If you're in a standard, I probably lean Thielen just because he's a big 6'4", red zone threat who can score like 10 touchdowns on, 50 targets, which is a ridiculously efficiency number. But I like what Mingo can be. At the combine, Mingo did okay. Like in his interviews, he wasn't impressive, but I just think that size and that offense that's just, we don't know what that offense is. We have no clue. We're talking about a new quarterback, new coach, an offensive coordinator, all new receivers except for Laviska Shenault, who was only there last year, Terrace Marshall, new running back. Like, it's all brand new. We have no clue. We have no way of leaning on what could be what. So I do think Mingo can take over that role.
All right, let's move on over to Mims, Reed, and let's go ahead and throw Rice into this mix because I think that he squeezes right between the 2 of those guys. Jaden Reed scored touchdown in the preseason, of course. Is going to be part of the 3 wide receiver sets, most likely. We're going to see a lot of Dobbs. We're going to see, of course, Christian Watson, and then Reed, who could be playing the slot. I think that's where he's projected. Meanwhile, we have Mims, who is most likely going to be that deep threat with Tim Patrick out, although Cortland Sutton can also play that deep threat as well. But Mims was drafted by Sean Payton to play a certain role, and it looks like he could be playing that role. KJ Hamler's out. Meanwhile, we have Rashee Rice, who was, kind of nicked going into the draft process as being more of like a tugboat type player with no size. Yet he looks good in training camp. He looks fast. He looks electric. In the preseason, didn't he score a touchdown already in the preseason as well?
I can't remember.
But either way, he still looks electric. He's been garnering attention. We don't really know what to expect with the Kansas City Chiefs. Somewhat of an unknown in terms of everything outside of Justin or of MVS. Right, running deep routes, and Travis Kelce catching balls. Yep. Every other pass catcher, we have no idea what to expect. So out of those 3 guys, which one would you most likely roster in a redraft league for PPR?
I'm going with Mims. I like what Sean Payton can do with him. I believe Russell Wilson will have to be better than last year. Like, last year was just an atrocious year. I'm a big believer that once is a fluke, twice is a pattern, 3 times is the expectation. Now, you can say it's been 2 years for Russell Wilson because he had similar numbers as last year in Seattle, but I think he'll be better with Sean Payton and not Nathaniel Hackett. There's still possibility that Cortland Sutton could get traded, or Jerry Jeudy for that matter. I mean, there was talks early on, I think, with Tim Patrick getting hurt, it limits those chances, but if they really like Mims, they can move one of those guys. I like what you said. Mims could be that 3rd wide receiver. We know Russell Wilson has the potential to be a top 5 quarterback. It's been a few years since we've seen it, but we've seen that he can do that. I like Rice. Also, you have Patrick Mahomes, who's the best, if not arguably the best quarterback in the league. I just worry that outside of Travis Kelce, there hasn't been a guy who's really stepped up other than Tyreek Hill. Right? MVS gets targets. Juju had a decent amount of targets, but didn't do much. Like, Mahomes just spreads the ball around too much for me. And then Reed I like, but I'm a big believer in Romeo Dobbs. I think Christian Watson is that deep threat. I just don't see a role for Jordan Reed in that offense. I think it's going to be very vanilla for the Packers with Jordan Love. I think they're just going to kind of take it easy on him and not like open up the whole playbook to start off. So I think Jalen Reed could have a slow start to the year. So I'm a believer in Mims. I think he'd be good. We saw this before with Sean Payton being able to have 3 decent receivers. We've seen it in Denver before with, when they had Judy, Sutton, and Tim Patrick. They were all really good receivers. So I think Mims can be the guy. He can be that slot guy for Russell Wilson. So I'm drafting Mims in redraft.
Dustin, let's talk about something, okay? Let's talk about something real quick, because you came to me in the start of the show and you did this whole entire monologue about how you need to see 100 targets to get a draft-worthy wide receiver, right?
Yes.
To get a wide receiver inside the top, 36. And then you take Denzel Mims, who's a deep ball receiver. I feel like this is the case where we could be watching an MVS type case where you just see a rookie running deep routes, running wind sprints, and seeing a 12% target share. I mean, what's more in the realm of possibilities?
I agree with you. I don't think any of these guys get close to 100 targets. I think if there's a guy that could I think Mims will have the most targets out of the 3.
Really?
Yeah, I think he'll have the most targets out of the 3. I think he's got the better quarterback. I won't say better because obviously Mahomes is the best quarterback. But I think he's got the best situation there in Denver. I'll say this. He could have 40 targets, but he could have 6 touchdowns. Like, he's got that deep ball threat that could just go off.
But when do you know when to start him? That's the question.
Well,
right?
that's the problem is
consistency from rookie.
I would rather the way I build my teams is I have the browse method. So you balance reliability and opportunity with spikes and excitement. So BROWSE. Mims is the spikes and excitement type guy for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draft some more reliability early in my draft. So I might get, Hopkins, who's going to see a ton of targets. I'm going to try to get one of those top end receivers, an AJ Brown, Devonta Smith. There's also a lot of concerns. Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton have not been healthy. Like, they could go down and Mims could slide into those roles. So I think there's a better pathway for Mims to have targets than there is Reed or Rice. I don't think he cracks the top 36, and I think you are going to struggle with when to start him, but there's more opportunity down the road for him to get playing time than I think those other guys.
All right. I can somewhat see it, but I'm still going to go with Reed, Rice, and then Mims for myself, although I do like Mims. I'm not going to lie to you. I still think that all 3 of them could end up very close to top 48, if not top 36. My dude, we're not going to go through all these guys, but there is one guy that I have to talk about, and that's Tank Dell. Tank Dell, the touchdown machine. 24 touchdowns, I think, in the past 3 years of his collegiate, 2 years, I think, of his collegiate career. This guy's showing that he's going to be an asset on this offense. Talk to me about him.
I love Tank Dell. I loved everything about him at the Combine. The Combine's weird because if you go, there is no sound in the building whatsoever. Like, they don't broadcast anything. It's just dead quiet. You have to listen on your headphones to the Daniel Jeremiah stuff that people are watching from home. And the receivers run those routes at like half speed. They're just like, yeah, I'll catch a ball. Tank Dell was going full bore at those drills. Every route was full speed. They do this gauntlet one where they have guys on either side throwing balls. And most of the guys are running half speed, catch it.
I love that one.
Tank Dell was going so fast that the quarterbacks couldn't get him the ball fast enough. Like, he threw everybody off the rhythm. He was going at it. I think CJ Stroud is the best quarterback from this draft. He's vanilla. Yes, he's not going to run a ton of balls. He's not going to run a ton like Anthony Richardson. I think he throws better than Bryce Young. Even if it's not him, even if it's Davis Mills, Tank Dell can score. Tank Dell is electric with this. Yes, I think Tank Dell is a great play. You are going to struggle.
I knew we had this connection.
You are going to struggle
when it's going to happen.
You're going to struggle with Tank Dell and when to start him. Does he ever crack your lineup is the question. I don't know if he does. I like John Mechie a little bit more in that offense because I think he's the better receiver. They're both kind of small. Nico Collins can't stay hurt. Robert Woods still has something left in the tank, enough that he'll trot out there. But I think Tank Dell is a tremendous athlete, and I think that there's a lot of people not talking about him. I think everybody's just out on Houston after the years they've had. So I think, but I agree with you. I think he's the guy I want to have.
That works for me. Listen, I just got an emergency phone call, so we do have to end this podcast a little bit short. I'm sorry to end this on you. Maybe we can have you back next week to continue this conversation. But let everybody know where to find you real quick.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at the DUnit13, so THEDUNIT 13. I'm the content director over at Dynasty Pros, so we got articles coming out 2 times a day, sometimes 3 times a day. You can also find my stuff. I write for QB List and Dynasty Nerds, but Twitter is the best place to find me. Before we go, I will say there's one name I want to talk about, Michael Wilson.
I love it.
For Arizona, if you're looking for a guy at the end of your drafts, grab Michael Wilson. He's fast. He's bigger. There is no competition there outside of Hollywood Brown. He could easily be a guy who gets 100 targets, who could jump up in the top, close to the top 36. So
I absolutely love it, my friend. I'm on the same boat with you. We do have to cover some of the guys that are not going to make it in the top 36 and finish off this rookie list. Dust, if you're free next week, I would love to have you back on the show. Just continue this. If y'all are listening, please make sure y'all go check out youtube.com/fantasy intervention. Once again, that's youtube.com/fantasy intervention. Thank you guys for listening, and thank you all for letting us intervene with your fantasy football life. We're out.